think that we are better than others. And each time we are given a responsibility, let us know that it is a call to service. The other problem we have with those of us who serve in the church is that we have gotten used to sacred things. Sometimes don't bother to ask God that why are you giving me this responsibility in the midst of so many people? You can imagine there are so many clergy in this diocese, and you have been chosen to be a dean. It isn't a favor, but it is a responsibility. I looked at the clergy around, and I saw only one is chosen to occupy the position of a Vicar General. Sometimes you only learn how important that position is when you have left it. Throughout my service in the church, I have had the privilege of holding many positions. Name it. There are only 2 positions I have not held in the church: provost and administrative secretary. Hizo zingine, I have passed through them all. And what was interesting, when I was made a canon, I was hardly 36 years. And the bishop made me a canon, and I protested. I told him that I don't think I deserve it. But he insisted that you have to be collected a canon. And I served as a canon, and later I realized how great that responsibility is. Many times we receive those responsibilities just for titles, isn't it? Some of my fellow canons feel very bad when they are not referred to as a canon. Would you mimi ni canon? It is you to make us realize that you are a canon by the role you are playing in the diocese. Sio kuenda kila mahali unatuambia, mimi mnajua mimi ni canon. Then when you become an archdeacon, the title changes, you become a venerable. An archdeacon, if you are not careful, you can be an archdemon. Because, I'm saying this from experience, because when you are newly ordained, like this new young clergy, I was exactly their age when I was made a deacon, slightly younger than them. And first I was rejected in the parish because the parish did not see a priest. Waliona mtoto. So wakaniambia, wewe sio padri, wewe ni mtoto. Because all the clergy they had seen were old men. And there was this old man who was an archdeacon who was supposed to help me. He never helped me. So if you are given a responsibility to help a young clergy, please make sure you do that responsibility. He never helped me. Baba Skofu, because he never helped me, there is a time he was supposed to come and celebrate Holy Communion. And each time he said he was coming, he wasn't coming. Now Wakristo walisema leo lazima utupe Holy Communion. I celebrated when I was a deacon. Because the one who was supposed to help me never helped me. He was absent and never appeared anywhere. And the following morning I had to go to report myself to the bishop. And I knocked the bishop's door at 6:30. And the bishop was scared and asked me, Padri, what has happened? Kambia Baba, jana I celebrated Holy Communion. You know, I thought he was going to be very furious with me. And he smiled. That is the late Bishop Okolo. He smiled and told me, I can even give you a paper to show that you can celebrate today. Because it is a license, isn't it? So, if we want to help these young people as they go through their probation, if they are placed under us, let us ensure that we guide them properly. They are not our competitors, isn't it? They are people brought to us so that we can mentor them. The biggest problem we have in the church now is mentorship. Those who are supposed to mentor others take them as competitors, and therefore mentorship is lacking. I am saying there is need to consider other great people who have been called before you, who have walked the same path, and who are still walking it today. We have great heroes of the Bible. We read of Abraham, the father of faith. We have heard of Moses, Samuel, Isaiah, whom we dwelt on so much, and Jeremiah. We have heard of the apostles like Paul. And finally, we have the disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ himself. It is always important to accept the call. And remember that your willingness does not depend on your circumstances, but it depends on your conviction. Sometimes the circumstances may be very difficult. You realize we are called differently, and we are called despite our background. The response should be, here I am. How readily do you accept the call? Goes with all of us. Dependence on God will ensure success. For Christ says, I will be with you to the uttermost part of the world. Yesu anasema atakuwa nanyi. And I think that is the most important thing for us to know. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. My brothers and sisters, these are two important statements that need to apply to all of us all the time. So that each time you're going to do something, don't depend on your strength. Don't depend on your knowledge. But do it depending on Christ, who is our strength. At times, we might be tempted to put our hopes on people to ensure our success. However, I want to warn us that might be short-lived, and it will not stand the test of time. Sometimes you go to the parish and you are told, if you cannot listen to so and so, those are the first ones. Umeingia hapa ujue ya kwamba fulani na fulani ndio msingi ya hii parokia. And sometimes they may be people who are just going to misguide you. Evaluate and see whether that person is dependable or not dependable. Kuna wazee wengine wanajifanya ndio nguzo, si ndio? That without me, nothing can happen in this parish. I served in another parish where one felt that he was so great, and even if you want to speak, you have to pass through him. Kuna siku ilinifikia hapa, nilimwambia ebu jaribu kujiondoa, tuone kama kanisa itasimama. God says that he is able to raise children from stones and call them Abraham's descendants. So don't think that without you the church cannot move. Play your role and exit, and others will come and take over from where you have left. Who says that when we are not in the scene, the church will stop moving? Sisi tumeitwa wakati huu, we are playing our role, and other people are going to take over from us. That is why mentorship is a must. For a moment, I want us to focus on the call of Jeremiah. And like all of us, I want us to assess Jeremiah's spiritual heritage. The call of God to Jeremiah is disappointing. It is disappointing to those who love the spectacular melodrama, because Jeremiah is not called in a dramatic way. The account of how Jeremiah became a prophet of God has the marks of simplicity when compared to the experiences of Isaiah, experiences of Ezekiel. Jeremiah came from a background of priests, and there is every reason to believe that he was reared in a godly Hebrew home. His name means God hears. Perhaps this one was an expression of the hope of his parents that the Lord would use him in helping to solve the problems that had been created by the reign of wicked King Manasseh, who was the ruler at the time of his birth. The religion of Israel had degenerated during the reign of King Manasseh. Apostasy was rampant in the land. The worship of Baal was prominent. The nation was depending upon alliances with the neighboring nations for national security. I don't know what is in your background. I may not know what controls the village you are coming from. There may be idolatry. There may be apostasy. They may not be depending on God. Jeremiah stood so clearly in the midst of all those trouble. But then there was also dialogue with God. The account of Jeremiah's confrontation by God in the deepest zone of his being is given in the form of a dialogue. Jeremiah describes the objects or events of common daily experience as the starting point of his perception of the divine truth and purpose for his life. We get the impression that the deep feeling that God was calling him into the fellowship of the prophets came to him as a result of a growing religious experience. If Jeremiah's experience of the divine call took the form of a vision, it was a calm, meditating vision that was not accompanied by any spectacular phenomenon. It was an experience with God on life's way. God chose him. God met him. God spoke to him, touched his lips, and commissioned him as a prophet. Huwa tunaona wakati mwingine pengine mtu ameokoka na amekuja ushirika, akitoa ushuhuda, saa zingine tunasema hajaokoka vizuri, si ndio? Kwa sababu hajapitia ile drama watu wengine wanapitia. But God calls us in very different ways. Kuna wengine wanaenda kulala na wanaamuka na wanasema, unajua nini, nimeokoka. It doesn't have to be very dramatic. And we see how Jeremiah was also called. God is just telling Jeremiah, before you were formed, I knew you. Na nilikuwa nisha prepare wewe to be a prophet. So Jeremiah tries to argue, lakini Mungu ashaamua. Hawa wameitwa. Wewe mahali huko, you may be doubting their call, lakini you are not the one who calls. Sisi kazi yetu ni kudhibitisha, si ndio? Lakini ni Mungu ndiye anaita watu. Mahali huko unaweza umekuwa ukiwatazama, unawaangalia na unaona na yule mwingine hajaitwa kamili. That is not your work. Your work is to help them grow in faith. In Jeremiah's story, we also learn of predestination. By some mysterious manner, God made it known to this young man that he was a chosen instrument. If you read verses 4 to 5. As Jeremiah meditated upon the purpose of God for his life, the conviction was forced upon his mind that a combination of things happened before his birth. that were to be determining factors in his becoming a prophet. He came to realize that everything he had received or that had happened to him had worked together under the hand of God to prepare him for the work to which he was being called. The awareness that he had been a thought of God before his birth must have stirred this sensitive young man to the very depths of his being. Kuna vitu zimefanyika kwa maisha yenu. They may not be very pleasant. They may be moments you don't want to remember. But know that God was using them to prepare you for his work. There is nothing that has happened without a purpose. God ordained it that way. How did Jeremiah respond? We are seeing him a bit hesitant. So his first reaction to this perception of God's purpose for his life was a feeling of utter insufficiency. We can sympathize with him when we recognize the immensity of the task ahead of him. He was to be a prophet, not only to Judah, but to all nations as well. So Jeremiah's response to the call of God was, I do not know how to speak. Mimi sijui kuongea, for I am a child. This was not a plea of unfitness of character, as in the case of Isaiah. Jeremiah was pleading his youth, his inexperience, and his lack of ability. There are times when, like Jeremiah, we plead our limitations. Moses realized that he was not eloquent in speech. Jonah wondered how he would face the people of Nineveh. Sometimes we plead our background. Sometimes we plead our education. There may be something you are pleading, but you must have also been trapped in some imaginations of how limited you are in certain areas of your life. But as God gave Jeremiah assurance, it is the assurance he's giving you today that he will be with you. Simple. The Lord who has called you has promised to be with you. This is a divine assurance. God took steps to reassure the timid, hesitant young prophet of divine help in the discharge of his prophetic duties. He was led to understand that he was to speak only that which God commanded him to speak. His own intellect was not to be the source of the oracles he was to utter. Never depend on your own intellect. They were to come from God and would carry divine authority within themselves. So Jeremiah was then assured of divine deliverance from his enemies. In verse 8, he was assured that God would put his divine words in his mouth. Weenda tu, omba Mungu atakupe maneno yake. So the nature of Jeremiah's ministry, we are told that Jeremiah was to be a prophet, set over the nations and over the kingdoms. The effect of God's work in words spoken by Jeremiah will be twofold. One, it will both be constructive and destructive. The word will serve to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow that which is displeasing to God. You're going to a community where there is a lot of brokenness. A community where so many things are happening that are not pleasing to God. And you are not supposed to be complacent. You are supposed to be the voice of reason, isn't it? Sometimes the church is supposed to be the alternative voice. And that is why Jeremiah is given this difficult task: pluck, pull, destroy, and overthrow. The constructive work of the word will also be to build and to plant that which is good. Are we together? And I think, clergy, we are moving together, isn't it? Because we are called to destroy, to bring down that which is not pleasing to God. And then we plant and build that which is pleasing to God. So sometimes you are taken to a parish where the first responsibility is to destroy. Yes, there are parishes where there are bureaucracy which are not making the parish to move. You have to destroy them and then start building them up. Lakini you destroy with wisdom. Beyond a ministry and a message of judgment, Jeremiah was encouraged to look forward to a better and more hopeful state of affairs. As clergy, we are reminded that we have to combine this prophetic role with that of shepherding the flock of Christ. And that is why we read Jeremiah and John 10. So turning to John 10, we realize that one of the most beautiful expressions Jesus used to describe himself was that of a good shepherd, isn't it? You are called to be a good shepherd. The key character introduced here is the shepherd. He has proper relationship with the sheep because they hear and know his voice and will follow him. Are we together? There must be a relationship and a proper relationship between the shepherd and the flock, isn't it? Because the flock is supposed to hear and follow the shepherd. The flock is supposed to identify the shepherd from strangers. We can observe a couple of things about the shepherd with whom Jesus identifies himself. A shepherd is committed to a flock and responsible for guiding the sheep. Not only guiding, but protecting them and attending to their needs. You are being sent out, and you are being sent to the flock, and you must be a shepherd, and a good shepherd. The characteristics of a good shepherd, one is commitment. Commitment to the flock. A good shepherd is responsible for guiding the sheep. Apart from guiding them, you protect them and attend to their needs. To serve as a shepherd means to demonstrate commitment to the well-being of the other people. It means watching out for them, helping them, and teaching them. The first thing is that the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The second thing that makes him good is that he knows his own sheep. He knows his followers by name, and they know him. They recognize his voice. Jesus Christ, as the good shepherd, appears as the guide, protector, the healer, the shepherd of his sheep, who needs spiritual food, healing care, and mercy. Jesus Christ, the good shepherd, finds joy in seeing the weak and suffering sheep find their way towards spiritual healing. A shepherd's primary responsibility is the safety and the welfare of the flock. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Lazima tuangalie welfare ya the flock that God has put under our care. First, this shepherd has the well-being of the sheep at heart rather than his own well-being. This shepherd is neither a thief nor a bandit who would steal the sheep. Jesus emphasizes the particular difference between the bandit and the shepherd. The shepherd enters rightly, properly, and openly into the sheepfold. It is appropriate for him to come and call, and he does so through the door. The relationship here is of trust. The sheep hear and follow the shepherd because they are able to know whom they trust. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. If you find clergy who have problems with their parishioners, the beginning of the problems is lack of trust. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Pengine naongea maneno yenye I'm not supposed to speak here. Huh? The beginning of the problem is lack of what? Lack of trust. And the moment the flock do not trust their shepherd, then there is a broken relationship. Wakati huyo ndio askofu ataanza kupata ujumbe kalikali kutoka kwa parokia. Sindio? I think you people are very nice because you are not aggressive as our people. Our people will call you and tell you, Bishop, come and take this your man away. But hapa ninyi ni watu wangwana sana. You are very diplomatic. In our place, they will even lock you out of the vicarage. Wanakuambia hii ni our house, isn't it? You are not going to stay here because you have lost their trust. Weka bidii sana so that you don't lose their trust. And you will only not lose their trust if you remain a good shepherd. In verse 4, the Bible says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Another piece of the shepherd's behavior, he brings the sheep out of the fold and then goes before them. The sheep do not simply escape some confinement or hasten out of the fold to brave the larger world on their own. Are we seeing that metaphor or that image? Their shepherd leads them out and then goes before them, in front of them to lead. The sheep are not abandoned. Brethren, we are called to lead in trust, and we must lead from the front. You know, this image of leading from the front is very important to us. Sometimes we lead parishes, but we are leading from behind. The laity have run away with the Christians. We are following them where they are going. Yes. I attended a parish council meeting, and I sat and I wanted to see how this clergy is conducting the parish council. And he was not in charge. He's a chairman who is not in charge. Kuna canon mwingine hapo kiherehere ndiye anasema fulani pia aongee. So the clergy fears because he's a canon, isn't it? But you are supposed to lead from the front. We are being given an image where you are opening the sheep pen and you go ahead and the sheep are following you because they know you. Saa zingine you open the sheep pen but they are not following you because they don't trust you. So they are following those whom they trust. we must cultivate a sense of trust in the people we lead. When this image did not click for people, Jesus tried again to contrast himself with thieving leaders, becoming very specific about those who had come before him as the thieves and bandits that he had mentioned earlier on, and whom the sheep rightly fled. Jesus turns to a clear statement of identity, and he says, I am the door. I am the proper way. I am the right way, the only way into the sheepfold. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. You can see greater responsibilities are coming your way. You are the door. And those who use that door are supposed to get pasture. And that pasture is life and eternal life. You are supposed to show them the way to eternal life. When we look at Psalms 23 or Ezekiel 34, then we realize that Jesus is the good shepherd that is referred to in those texts. The leader whose work and life are for the sheep and their well-being. He is the right way. He is the true way. Enter into that amplitude, that fullness of life. Brethren, you are called to this ministry at a time when even the wider society, in the wider society, there seems to be very little trust in any form of leadership. Like the good shepherds, you must strive to let the flock which you are leading have total trust in your leadership. Jesus says that the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Your calling to the ministry comes at a time when the society is faced with many deficits. Our society is faced with deficiency. This is experienced in all sectors of our existence as a nation. The greatest deficit we have in this society today is deficit of values. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. As a nation, we seem to suffer a serious compromise of moral and ethical standards. You realize that we have been priding ourselves as a country of law and order, yet we have been invaded by a series of maladies, which include, but not limited to, unbridled greed, impunity, rampant corruption, unhealthy competition that exists at all levels of society. We have normalized practices in this country, like buying government plum jobs. Kwetu, if you want a job, you pay for it. I don't know what happens here. Even jobs in the disciplined forces are sold. Recently, we have seen how major corruption cases who are facing those in power have all of a sudden crumbled. Where is our hope? Tumaini iko wapi jameni? When we were going for elections, we were told tutatengeneza serikali ya mama mboga na watu wa boda. At least Coast produced one mama mboga called Aisha Jumwa. And I was surprised that she has 100 million worth. Na yeye ni mama? Aya. The deficit in values and compromise of ethical standards has now been entrenched in our culture, and that it has become normal realities of the times we live in. Go even to our universities, look at what happens there. People are buying marks, and the girls are paying with their bodies to be given marks. Nani watoto wetu? And we don't want to speak about it. When the lecturers pass near us, we give them a lot of respect. But what are they doing behind the curtains? Who will stand and speak? These maladies are no doubt a reflection of the state of our spiritual health. Brethren, you are called to revive spiritual zeal and sustain hope in a world where divisions, hatred, malice, bigotry, and all sorts of biases have been normalized. Spiritual maladies need spiritual solutions. We are being called to return people to faithfulness in prayer, joy in hope, and patience in affliction. When you go to those parishes, make sure you organize real revival meetings where people will turn away from their wickedness and do what is expected. This is only possible if our spiritual standing with God is right. And that is why, as a church and as clergy, we must ensure that we ourselves are spiritually right with God. Unless we get this basic spiritual relationship right as a nation, then our efforts in ministry at whatever level will be lukewarm at best and sheer hypocrisy at worst. There is no way we can be part of a terrain of serious maladies and deficit, yet claim to be faithful in prayer, joyful in hope. One great man called St. Augustine, talking of believers' disconnect between a life of faith and practice, said, "Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger that things are the way they are, courage to make them the way they ought to be." The pathetic situation that we find ourselves in ought to invoke righteous anger in us, angry enough to want to change things for the better. Likewise, because we are people of hope, we can gather the courage to dare change things to make them the way they ought to be. Brethren, we have seen a worrying trend in so many areas. The high cost of living due to inflation, unaffordable prices of basic commodities such as unga, cooking oil, cooking gas, fuel, high unemployment, rise in insecurity, sinking majority of Kenyans into poverty. This is compounded further by slow business recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, prolonged drought, starvation, too much focus on politics at the expense of economic growth, poor quality of services at the government institutions, especially in healthcare and education services, and other outside factors. Recently, we have had the debate on GMO foods, especially on maize. The CS of Trade, one Kamau Kuria, is on record as saying that after all, Kenyans are dying of so many things, so GMO will just be one of the things that will make them die. You want me to believe that that is a responsible statement from a responsible minister? We dare say this, and I want to paraphrase a comment which was made by one of our leaders recently. Food security and provision of sustainable foods undoubtedly remain the core function of a responsible government. This function, however, must not compromise the responsibility of ensuring that people's health is protected. Our government has unfortunately decided to play with the lives of Kenyans by importing genetically modified maize into the country against recent advice from scientists. This has been compounded by unwarranted, reckless statements from some government officers. The lives of Kenyans, our environment, and the future of this nation cannot be sacrificed at the altar of self-gain for a few. Accepting GMO is not dealing with food security. It simply makes us important to grow our own organic foods, which have sustained our livelihood for centuries in Africa. It will kill our domestic seeds industry, killing our own agriculture, and making us slaves to the likes of Monsanto's for the rest of our lives. We must courageously and totally reject the GMOs. And I think the church must stand firm and say no to this. The church therefore finds herself at a crossroad. We are called to reinvigorate our spiritual lives and strengthen our interventions in mitigating against such prevailing hardships that face our people. Desperation has driven most of our people to depression. We have a duty to first seek to cure the spiritual hunger. Yes, it is possible to inspire hope, a hope that produces transformative action towards uplifting of physical and mental burdens. If the church has to exist for the uplifting of others, we cannot afford to be part of the spiritual malady that besets this nation. Our services to the nation must be transforming, and our interventions empowering in every aspect so as to deliver total healing. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. As you do this, know that at times you are going to be on the receiving end. Since you will